The cowboy dropped to his knees in the frozen mud, right there in the middle of Silver Creek's winter market. Josiah Cole, the richest rancher in the valley, knelt before a fat widow everyone despised, his voice cracking like breaking ice. "Please," he whispered, "I'll give you anything. My daughters are dying. They won't eat. They won't speak. And you're the only one my Annie has looked at in 3 months." If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe, stay until the end, and witness a love that will break and rebuild your heart. 3 little girls stood at their mother's grave while the first snow of winter fell, and not one of them cried. Eliza, the eldest at 10 years old, gripped her middle sister's hand so tight her knuckles went white. Rosie, 6 and burning with fury, kicked the frozen dirt again and again until her father finally said, "Enough." And Annie, 4 years old, small as a whisper, hadn't spoken a single word since she'd watched her mama take her last breath 3 months ago. Josiah Cole stood behind his daughters like a man carved from Montana stone. His jaw was set. His eyes were dry. But Martha Goodwin, watching from 30 feet away at the edge of the cemetery, could see the fractures running through him. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself. The mourners dispersed slowly, black coats disappearing against the gray sky like crows scattering. Mrs. Prudence Whitmore lingered longest, her thin face arranged in practiced sympathy. "You'll need help with those girls, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice carrying across the frozen air. "A man alone with 3 daughters? It isn't proper. The church ladies can arrange—" "I'll manage." "But surely—" "I said I'll manage." Josiah's voice could have frozen the creek solid. Mrs. Whitmore's mouth tightened, but she retreated, gathering her skirts like she'd been personally insulted. Martha watched it all from her distance. She should leave. She'd go back to her little cottage and her candles and her grief and her loneliness. She had no business being here. But something held her feet to the frozen ground. The smallest girl, Annie, had turned her head. Just slightly, just enough to look directly at Martha, with eyes that were too old for her tiny face. Martha felt the recognition like a physical blow. She sees it too, Martha thought. She sees that I understand. Then Josiah gathered his daughters, lifted Annie into his arms, and walked away without looking back. The 2 older girls followed in silence, Eliza rigid and controlled, Rosie still kicking at every rock in her path. Martha stood alone in the cemetery for a long time after they left. "I'm sorry, Catherine Cole," she whispered to the fresh grave. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I'm sorry no one could." The wind howled its answer, and Martha finally went home. 3 months later, the Saturday winter market was in full swing despite the bitter cold. Martha had positioned her table in the worst possible spot, tucked between the blacksmith's overflow and a wagon selling questionable tonics. Nobody wandered this far unless they were lost or looking for something shameful. That suited her fine. Her table held rows of beeswax candles, each one hand-dipped and perfect. Beside them sat a basket of gingerbread cookies, stars and hearts, and little men with raisin eyes. The smell of cinnamon and honey drifted through the frozen air. Not a single person had stopped. They walked past close enough to smell the lavender water the church ladies wore, close enough to hear their whispers. Such a shame. Let herself go completely. Poor Thomas Goodwin must be spinning in his grave. They say she ate so much she crushed that baby right inside her. Martha's hands clenched beneath her apron. 3 years, and the rumors still cut like fresh wounds. Her son had been stillborn. The doctor had said these things happened, that it wasn't her fault, that sometimes God simply called babies home before they could draw breath. But the town had decided differently. The town always decided differently. She was packing up. Not a single candle sold, not a single cookie bought, when she heard the commotion. Voices first, low and curious. Then the crowd parted like Moses had commanded it, and Josiah Cole walked through with his 3 daughters trailing behind him like little ghosts. He looked worse than he had at the funeral. His clothes were clean but rumpled. His jaw was shattered with days of beard. His eyes had the hollow look of a man who'd forgotten what sleep felt like. But it was the girls who made Martha's chest tighten. Eliza walked too straight, too careful, like she was holding the whole world on her small shoulders. Rosie stomped beside her, radiating fury at everyone and everything. And Annie? Annie was a wisp, a shadow, a child-shaped absence where a little girl should be. She didn't look at the market stalls, didn't react to the noise or the smells or the other children running past. She just drifted at her father's side, one hand clutching a worn rag doll, her eyes fixed on nothing. Martha remembered what the women had been saying for weeks. Those Cole girls haven't been right since their mother passed. The youngest won't eat, won't speak, just sits there like a little ghost. Poor man's tried everything. Doctors, prayers, even that new tonic from back east. Nothing works. Mark my words, that child's going to fade away, and there won't be a thing anyone can do. Martha watched them move through the market, Josiah checking items off some invisible list, the older girls following mechanically, and Annie floating along like she wasn't entirely there. Then Annie stopped. Just stopped, right in the middle of the crowd, her hand slipping free from her sister's grasp. "Annie!" Eliza spun around, panic flashing across her face. "Annie, you have to stay with—" But Annie wasn't listening. She was staring at something. She was staring at Martha's table. No, she was staring at the candles, at the small flame Martha had lit to keep her hands warm. The firelight reflected in Annie's enormous eyes, and for the first time in 3 months, there was something there besides emptiness. Martha didn't think. She just moved. She came around her table slowly, not wanting to startle the child, and knelt down in the snow, ignoring the cold that seeped through her skirts, ignoring the ache in her knees, ignoring everything except this little girl who was looking at light like she'd forgotten it existed. "Hello there," Martha said softly. Annie's eyes flickered to her face, just once, just briefly. "That's a pretty doll you've got," Martha continued, keeping her voice low and easy. "Did your mama make it for you?" Something shifted in Annie's expression. Pain, recognition, grief too big for such a small body. Martha reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a gingerbread star, still warm from the heat of her body. "I made too many of these today," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I was wondering if maybe you'd like one. No pressure, just if you're cold. Sugar helps with that, you know." She held out the cookie, palm flat, the way you'd offer a treat to a skittish horse. Annie stared at it. The market noise faded away. Martha could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the frozen ground biting through her skirts, could sense the crowd watching and whispering. She didn't care. All that mattered was this child. This tiny girl who'd stopped believing the world had anything good left to offer. Annie's hand moved. Slowly, carefully, like she was reaching through water. Her fingers, thin as bird bones, closed around the cookie. She lifted it, looked at it, turned it slightly, watching the way the sugar crystals caught the pale winter light. Then she took a bite. Martha stopped breathing. Annie chewed, swallowed. Her throat worked, and something flickered in her eyes. Not quite recognition, not quite hope, but something. Something that had been missing for 3 long months. She took another bite. "Annie?" Josiah Cole's voice cracked through the moment. He was suddenly there, dropping to his knees beside his daughter, his face a battlefield of hope and terror. "Annie, baby, you're eating." His hands hovered like he was afraid to touch her, afraid the spell might break. "You're actually eating." Annie finished the cookie, looked at Martha, and her lips parted. "More?" she whispered. The word was barely audible, rough from months of silence. But it was a word. It was her voice. It was the first thing she'd said since watching her mother die. Josiah Cole, the hardest man in Silver Creek, the rancher who'd faced down blizzards and wolves and bankruptcy without flinching, made a sound like something breaking inside him. Martha pulled out another cookie, hands trembling. "Of course, sweetheart. Help yourself." Annie took it, ate it faster this time, reached for a third. And Josiah Cole looked at Martha Goodwin with eyes full of tears and said the words that would change everything. "Please, please, whatever you're doing, don't stop." The whispers started immediately. "Is that the Goodwin widow? What's she doing with Cole's girls?" "Feeding them, looks like. Well, I suppose she'd know all about eating." Laughter, pointed and cruel. Martha felt it land on her shoulders, familiar as an old shawl. She started to pull back, to stand, to apologize and disappear the way she always did. But Josiah's hand caught her wrist. "Don't," he said. Just that. One word. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man hanging on by his fingernails. A man who'd been drowning for months and had just felt solid ground under his feet for the first time. "I don't know what you did," he said quietly, but she spoke. She ate. "Do you understand what that means? 3 months of nothing. Doctors, tonics, prayers, and you gave her a cookie and she came back." "I didn't." "You did." His grip on her wrist gentled, but didn't release. "I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what they think. If you can help her, help them. I'll pay anything. Do anything." "Mr. Cole, Josiah." His eyes were desperate. "Please, just, please." Martha looked past him to where Annie sat in the snow, methodically eating a 4th cookie, while her sisters watched with identical expressions of shock. Eliza's careful control had cracked. Rosie's anger had shifted into something that looked almost like hope. "I can try," Martha heard herself say. "I don't know if it'll work for all of them, but I can try." Relief flooded his face like spring thaw. "Tomorrow? Can you come to the ranch tomorrow?" "I could bring breakfast. Early, if you'd allow it." "Allow it?" A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. "Ma'am, I'd get down on my knees and beg if you asked me to." "That won't be necessary." Martha gently freed her wrist and stood, brushing snow from her skirts. "Just have coffee ready. I'll bring everything else." She started to gather her things, trying to ignore the eyes boring into her back, the whispers growing louder by the second. "Mrs. Goodwin?" She turned. Josiah Cole was still kneeling in the snow, his 3 daughters around him, looking up at her like she was something holy. "Thank you," he said. "I know you don't know us. Know you've got no reason to help, but thank you." Martha's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had thanked her for anything? When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen something other than a cautionary tale? "Don't thank me yet," she managed. "I haven't done anything." "You've done more in 5 minutes than this whole town's done in 3 months. She didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to hold the weight of his gratitude, his desperation, his hope. So she just nodded and walked away, basket clutched to her chest, feeling the whispers follow her like shadows. Martha Goodwin. The voice stopped her cold at the edge of the market. Prudence Whitmore stood in her path, thin and rigid in her black wool coat. 2 other church ladies flanking her like generals in some holy army. "Mrs. Whitmore," Martha kept her voice neutral. "I couldn't help but notice your little performance back there." Prudence's eyes were ice. "Quite the spectacle," kneeling in the snow, feeding that poor child like she was some stray animal. I gave her a cookie, that's all.
Is it? Prudence stepped closer, because from where I stood, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like a lonely, desperate woman inserting herself into a grieving family's tragedy. Martha felt heat climb her neck. I was just trying to help. Help? Prudence's laugh was a cold, sharp thing. The way you helped your own child? The one who never drew breath because you couldn't control your appetites? The words hit like a physical blow. Martha swayed, but held her ground. My son was stillborn. The doctor said, doctors say many things to spare feelings. Prudence's smile was thin as a blade. But we all know the truth, don't we? A woman your size, carrying a child? It's a wonder you didn't smother the poor thing outright. Tears burned behind Martha's eyes. She would not cry, not here, not in front of this woman. I'm going to help the Cole girls, she said, and her voice only shook a little. Tomorrow, and the day after, and as long as they need me. Then you're a fool. Prudence leaned in close enough that Martha could smell her rose water. Josiah Cole is a desperate man, and desperate men don't think clearly. But when he comes to his senses, when he realizes what kind of creature he's let near his daughters, you'll be right back where you started. Alone. Unwanted. Exactly what you deserve. She swept past, her companions following, leaving Martha standing alone in the cold. That night, Martha didn't sleep. She stood in her small kitchen, barely bigger than a pantry, smelling of wax and honey and the ghosts of 1,000 meals, and baked. Biscuits, cinnamon rolls, a loaf of soft bread that would still be warm by morning. She prepared everything she could think of that might tempt 3 broken children back to life. Her hands moved automatically while her mind spun. What if it doesn't work? What if it makes things worse? What if Prudence is right? She thought about Annie's face, solemn and ancient, carrying grief too heavy for such small shoulders. She thought about Eliza, only 10, trying so hard to hold her family together. She thought about Rosie, 6 years old, and burning with an anger she didn't know how to release. She thought about her own son, the one who'd never opened his eyes, never drawn breath, the one she'd held for 10 minutes before the midwife took him away. I couldn't save you, Martha thought, hands deep in dough, but maybe I can help them. When the sky turned gray with approaching dawn, she packed her basket, wrapped her warmest shawl around her shoulders, and started walking. 5 miles through frozen country. The road to Cole Ranch cut through open grassland, everything covered in white and silver and the pale blue of winter shadows. Martha's breath plumed in the cold, and her feet went numb before she'd walked a mile. But she kept going. What waited at the end was worth any amount of cold. The ranch appeared slowly through the morning mist, a 2-story house surrounded by barns and corrals, smoke rising from the chimney. Horses stamped in the near pasture. A few ranch hands were already at work, and they looked up as she approached, curious but not hostile. The front door opened before she reached the porch. Josiah stood there, Annie in his arms, the other 2 girls crowded behind him. He looked like he hadn't slept either, dark circles under his eyes, jaw shadowed with stubble. But something had shifted in his expression. Hope. Fragile and terrified, but hope. You came, he said. I said I would. I know, He stepped back, letting her pass. Kitchen's through here. Martha followed him inside. The house was clean, but cold. Not in temperature, but in feeling. Everything was perfectly ordered, like a museum of a life that had stopped moving forward. No flowers on the tables, no curtains in the windows, no signs of children, except the 3 silent girls watching her with various degrees of suspicion. The kitchen was better. A fire crackled in the hearth, and someone had cleared the table and set out plates. Martha set down her basket and began unpacking without ceremony. "I didn't know what everyone liked," she said, her voice calm and easy. "So I brought a bit of everything. Biscuits, bread, cinnamon rolls. I'll do eggs once I see what you've got." "The pantry's full," Josiah set Annie down gently. "Take whatever you need." "Good." Martha found the butter, the eggs, the cream. She moved around the unfamiliar kitchen with purpose, not looking directly at the children, just working. "Someone want to show me where the skillets are?" Silence. Then Eliza stepped forward, her face carefully blank. "Bottom cabinet, left of the stove." "Thank you, sweetheart." The endearment slipped out automatically. Eliza flinched like she'd been struck. Martha pretended not to notice. She found the skillet, set it heating on the stove, and started cracking eggs. "I used to make these for my husband," she said, to no one in particular. "He said I made the best scrambled eggs in the territory. The secret's cream, not milk, and you have to take them off the heat before they look done." No response, but she felt eyes on her back, 3 sets of them, watching every move. She started humming. Nothing specific, just a low melody that filled the silence without demanding attention. The eggs sizzled. The smell of butter and herbs filled the kitchen. "That's Mama's song." The voice was small, barely audible. Martha turned slowly. Rosie was standing in the doorway, her little hands clenched into fists, her freckled face twisted with something between grief and rage. "I'm sorry," Martha said gently. "I didn't know. I can stop." "Don't stop." This from Annie, who had crept closer while Martha wasn't looking. "Mama sang it when she cooked. Don't stop." Martha's heart clenched. She turned back to the stove and kept humming, softer now, while she finished the eggs and plated them alongside warm biscuits and fresh butter. "Breakfast is ready," she said. "Sit wherever you like." She took her own seat at the end of the table, far enough from the girls to give them space, close enough to pass dishes. She fixed her own plate without fanfare and started eating, exactly like she had with Annie in the market. No performance, no pressure, just a woman having her morning meal. Josiah sat across from her, coffee cup clutched in white-knuckled hands, barely breathing as he watched his daughters. Eliza moved first. She sat down carefully, took a biscuit, split it open, buttered it with precise movements. She ate slowly, mechanically, but she ate. Rosie stomped to her chair and grabbed a cinnamon roll like she was angry at it. She took a huge bite, glaring at everyone, daring them to comment. And Annie climbed into the chair beside Martha, not across the table, beside her, close enough to touch. She reached for a biscuit, studied it, and whispered, "Like the cookie?" "Different kind of good," Martha said softly. "Try it and see." Annie took a bite, chewed, swallowed. "Good," she said, and the word was the sweetest thing Martha had ever heard. Josiah made a sound in his throat, half laugh, half sob, and had to turn away, pressing his hand over his eyes. Martha kept eating, kept humming between bites, kept pretending this was ordinary, that broken families came together over breakfast all the time, that hearts didn't piece themselves back together in moments exactly like this one. When the meal was over, she stood to clean up, and Annie slid off her chair to follow. "Can I help?" the little girl asked, her third sentence of the morning, more words than she'd spoken in months combined. "I'd like that very much," Martha said. They washed dishes together in comfortable silence, Martha washing, Annie drying with a towel almost bigger than she was. The older girls watched from the table, their expressions unreadable. "You're good at this," Martha said. Annie looked up at her with those ancient eyes. "Mama let me help sometimes. Before." Before. The word hung in the air like a ghost. "Your mama sounds like she was a wonderful woman,"
Martha said carefully. She was. Annie's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. She got sick, and then she died. I was there when it happened. She held my hand, and then she stopped. Behind them, Martha heard Josiah's sharp intake of breath, heard Eliza whisper, "Annie, don't." "It's all right," Martha said, kneeling down to meet Annie's eyes. "You can talk about her here. You can say whatever you need to say." "Really?" Annie's brow furrowed. "Everyone else gets sad when I talk about her, so I stopped talking." The simple logic of it broke Martha's heart. "I get sad too, sometimes," she admitted. "But that doesn't mean I want you to stop. Being sad together is better than being sad alone. Don't you think?" Annie considered this for a long moment. Then she nodded solemnly and went back to drying dishes. Martha stayed through lunch, then through dinner. Then, when a blizzard rolled in faster than anyone expected, and Josiah insisted she couldn't walk home in that weather, she stayed the night. The next morning she woke to a small hand poking her shoulder. "Martha, Martha, wake up!" She opened her eyes to find Annie standing beside the bed, still in her nightgown, hair wild from sleep. "You stayed," Annie whispered. "I stayed." "You'll come back tomorrow, too?" Martha looked at this fragile child, this little girl who'd lost everything and was just starting to believe she might not lose anything more. "I'll come back every day," Martha promised, "for as long as you need me." Annie's face transformed. Not quite a smile. It would be weeks before Martha saw a real smile, but something close, something warm. "Papa said you might not," Annie confessed. "He said he hoped you would, but ladies don't always keep promises." "This lady does." Martha sat up and opened her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Annie climbed onto the bed and into Martha's embrace, her small body warm and trusting. And Martha held her, this child who wasn't hers, this child who might never be hers, and felt something long frozen start to thaw inside her chest. Downstairs, she could hear Josiah moving around the kitchen, hear Rosie's voice raised in argument, hear Eliza's patient attempts to keep the peace. A family, Martha thought. This is what a family sounds like. She'd almost forgotten. "Martha?" Annie's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart?" "I'm hungry." The words, the beautiful, ordinary, miraculous words, made Martha laugh out loud. "Then let's go make breakfast," she said. "I think I saw some bacon in that pantry, and I make the best scrambled eggs in Montana Territory. What do you say?" Annie pulled back, her face serious. "Better than Mama's?" Martha's heart caught. "I don't know, but maybe we can try to make them just as good. Would that be okay?" Annie thought about it, then nodded. Mama would like that. She didn't like people being sad all the time. She said sad was okay sometimes, but you had to eat anyway, because food doesn't wait for feelings. "Your mama was a very wise woman." "I know." Annie slid off the bed and held out her hand. "Come on, Papa burns eggs. He needs help." Martha took the small hand offered to her, bird bones and absolute trust, and let herself be led toward the kitchen, toward a family that wasn't hers, toward a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Behind her, the winter sun crept through the window, painting long golden shadows across the floor. And somewhere, deep in Martha's chest, in the place where hope had frozen solid 3 years ago, something cracked. Something began to melt. Something, at last, began to heal. The days fell into a rhythm after that, each morning the same and somehow different. Martha would wake before dawn, bake until her hands ached, and walk the 5 miles to Cole Ranch, through whatever weather Montana decided to throw at her. Snow, sleet, wind that cut like broken glass, none of it mattered. What waited at the end of that road was worth any amount of suffering. By the second week, Annie had stopped counting Martha's visits. She simply expected her to appear, the way she expected the sun to rise or the fire to burn. That trust was the most terrifying gift Martha had ever received. "You're going to wear yourself out," Josiah said one morning, watching her stamp snow from her boots in the doorway. 5 miles in this weather, every single day. It's not sustainable." "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. I can see it in your face." Martha hung up her shawl and moved past him toward the kitchen. "The girls need breakfast." "The girls need you alive and healthy." He caught her arm, gently, carefully, like he was afraid she might shatter. "Martha, please. Let me send someone with a wagon. And give the town more ammunition?" She shook her head. "They already think I'm trying to trap you. Arriving in your wagon every morning would only confirm it." "I don't care what they think. You should." Martha finally met his eyes. "You have a business to run, daughters to raise, a reputation that matters. I won't be the one who destroys all that." Josiah's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't be destroying anything. You'd be saving us. You are saving us." "Papa?" They both turned. Eliza stood in the kitchen doorway, her face carefully blank, but her eyes missed nothing. "Breakfast is getting cold," she said. "Annie's waiting." The moment broke. Martha moved toward the kitchen, and Josiah let her go, but she felt his gaze on her back the whole way. Annie was already at the table, legs swinging, watching the doorway with anxious eyes that brightened the moment Martha appeared. "You came," she said, the same words, every morning, like a ritual she couldn't quite believe. "I came," Martha kissed the top of her head. "I'll always come." Rosie was slumped in her chair, arms crossed, glaring at her untouched plate. The middle child had been the hardest to reach. All that anger coiled tight inside a 6-year-old body, looking for somewhere to explode. "Not hungry," Rosie announced before Martha could speak. "That's all right." Martha sat down and started fixing her own plate. "More cinnamon rolls for me." "I didn't say you could have them." "Didn't say I couldn't either." Rosie's glare intensified. Martha took a deliberate bite of a cinnamon roll, closed her eyes, and made a sound of exaggerated pleasure. These turned out particularly good today. The cinnamon's just right. Sure you don't want one?" "I said I'm not hungry." "And I said that's all right." Martha took another bite. "Your stomach, your choice." The standoff lasted approximately 30 seconds before Rosie's hand shot out and grabbed the biggest roll from the basket. She stuffed half of it in her mouth at once, chewing defiantly, like eating was an act of war. Martha said nothing, just kept eating her own breakfast while Annie giggled beside her. "Rosie's funny," Annie whispered. "She's something, all right." "I can hear you," Rosie said through a mouthful of pastry. "Good. Then you heard me say you're funny, which you are." Martha wiped crumbs from Annie's chin. "Funny and brave and exactly who you're supposed to be." Rosie stopped chewing. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Nobody had called her brave before. Difficult, yes. Troublesome, certainly. But never brave. "I'm not brave," she muttered. "I'm bad." "Who told you that?" "Everyone." Rosie's voice was small now, the anger draining away. "Mrs. Whitmore said I was a bad influence at school. Said I hit the Miller boy and made him cry." "Did you hit him?" "He said Mama was in hell because she didn't go to church enough." Rosie's chin came up, defiant. "So I punched him in the nose." Martha set down her fork. "Rosie, look at me." The girl looked up, braced for condemnation. "Your mama is not in hell," Martha said firmly. "And anyone who says otherwise is cruel and wrong. You shouldn't have hit that boy. We don't solve problems with fists, but I understand why you did. And that doesn't make you bad. That makes you a girl who loves her mother." Rosie's lower lip trembled. Really? Really. The tears came without warning, sudden and violent, like a dam breaking. Rosie lunged across the table and into Martha's arms, sobbing against her chest, 6 years of anger and grief and loneliness pouring out in a flood. Martha held her tight, didn't shush her, didn't tell her to stop, just let her cry until the storm passed. When Rosie finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and swollen, but something had shifted in her eyes. Something had released. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry for having feelings," Martha said. "Never be sorry for that." Across the table, Eliza watched with an expression Martha couldn't read. The eldest Cole girl had been the most distant these past 2 weeks. Polite but guarded. Helpful but never warm. She did everything right, said all the proper things, and gave absolutely nothing of herself away. It worried Martha more than Rosie's anger or Annie's silence ever had. Josiah appeared in the doorway, having clearly heard the commotion. His eyes went to Rosie's tear-streaked face, to Martha's arms still wrapped around her, and something in his expression cracked. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice rough. "We're fine," Martha said. "Just having a moment." "A good moment or a bad moment?" Rosie answered before Martha could. "A good one, Papa. Martha said I'm not bad. She said I'm brave." Josiah's gaze met Martha's over his daughter's head. The gratitude there was almost too much to bear. "She's right," he said quietly. "You're the bravest girl I know." That was the morning everything started to change. Not all at once. Nothing so simple as that. But in small ways, incremental shifts, the Cole household began to transform. Rosie's explosions came less frequently. Annie spoke more, full sentences now, sometimes even questions. Eliza remained distant, but Martha caught her watching sometimes, studying Martha like she was a puzzle to be solved. The children weren't the only ones changing. Josiah began finding excuses to linger in the kitchen during breakfast. He'd pour himself coffee and lean against the counter, asking Martha questions about her recipes, her childhood, her life before Thomas Goodwin. "You never talk about yourself," he said one morning, while the girls were occupied with a game in the front room. "2 weeks you've been coming here, and I barely know anything about you." "There's not much to know." "I doubt that." Martha kept her eyes on the dishes she was washing. "I was born in Ohio, moved west when I was 17 with my father and brothers. Married Thomas Goodwin when I was 22. Buried him when I was 31. That's the whole story." "What about your baby?" The dish slipped from Martha's hands into the soapy water. She fished it out carefully, buying time. "You don't have to tell me," Josiah said quickly. "I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's—" Martha set the dish aside and gripped the edge of the sink. "His name was Samuel, after my father. He was born 3 winters ago, during the worst blizzard Silver Creek had seen in a decade. He didn't survive. The doctor said, he said sometimes these things happen, that it wasn't anyone's fault, that God just—" She stopped, swallowed hard. But the town decided differently. They decided I was too fat, too indulgent, too weak. They decided I must have done something wrong, or God wouldn't have taken him. Martha. It's all right. I've made my peace with it. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. The only thing that matters now is that I can help your girls. Whatever people say about me, whatever they believe, it doesn't matter, as long as Annie keeps eating, and Rosie keeps talking, and Eliza keeps— She trailed off. Eliza keeps what? The eldest girl was a mystery Martha hadn't solved yet. Eliza worries me, Josiah admitted, as if reading her thoughts. The other two wear their pain on the outside, but Eliza, she just holds it all in. She was 10 years old when her mother died, and she's been trying to be a grown-up ever since. Someone should tell her she doesn't have to. I've tried. She doesn't listen. Then maybe she needs to hear it from someone else. Josiah moved closer. Close enough that Martha could smell coffee and leather and something underneath that was just him. She needs to hear it from you, he said quietly. They all do. I can provide for them, protect them. But what you give them, the warmth, the patience, the way you make them feel seen, I can't do that. I don't know how. You're their father. You love them. Loving them isn't enough. His voice cracked. I loved Catherine too, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't even comfort her properly at the end. She spent her last hours in agony, and all I could do was hold her hand and watch her slip away. Josiah, I'm not good at soft things, Martha. Never have been. I can break horses and run a ranch and face down any man who threatens my family. But making my daughters feel safe? Making them believe the world won't keep hurting them? That takes something I don't have. He was standing very close now, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the grief etched into every line of his face. You have it, Martha said softly. You just forgot how to use it. Then help me remember. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Martha's heart was pounding. She should step back, should put distance between them, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she said, I'll try. Josiah's hand came up slowly, like he was afraid of spooking her, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were rough with work, gentle with intention. Martha Goodwin, he murmured. How did I get so lucky that you wandered into my life? Luck had nothing to do with it. Annie saw my candles. Maybe. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. Or maybe God knew exactly what we all needed and put you in that market at exactly the right moment. Martha's breath caught. I'm not sure God thinks much about me these days. Then he's a fool, because you're the closest thing to grace I've ever seen. Before she could respond, a small voice piped up from the doorway. Are you going to kiss her, Papa? They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Annie stood watching them, her expression curious but not upset. No, Josiah said quickly. No, we were just talking. Mama used to look at you like that, Annie observed, before she'd kiss you. I remember. Martha's face burned. She busied herself with the dishes, unable to meet Josiah's eyes. Annie, sweetheart, Josiah said, his voice strained, why don't you go play with your sisters? Are you going to marry Martha? The question hit like a thunderclap. Martha dropped another dish. Josiah made a strangled sound. It's not appropriate to ask things like that, Annie. Why not? I like Martha. Rosie likes Martha. Even Eliza likes Martha, even though she won't say so. Annie cocked her head. If you married her, she could stay forever. She wouldn't have to walk home in the snow anymore. The simple, devastating logic of a 4-year-old. Martha finally found her voice. Annie, marriage is complicated. Your father and I barely know each other, and there are things you don't understand. Like what? Like the fact that people in town don't like me very much. If your father married me, they might stop liking him too. They might be mean to you and your sisters. People are already mean, Annie said matter-of-factly. They whisper about Mama. They whisper about Papa. They whisper about us. She shrugged, impossibly worldly for a 4-year-old. At least if you were here, we'd have someone to be mean with. Martha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She settled for kneeling down and pulling Annie into a hug. You're too smart for your own good, she murmured against the girl's hair. Mama said that too. Annie pulled back and looked at her seriously. I don't want you to go away, Martha. Promise you won't go away? There it was again, that terrible, beautiful word. Promise. I promise I'll stay as long as you need me, Martha said carefully. But sweetheart, I can't promise forever. Nobody can promise forever.
Mama promised, Annie said quietly. She promised she'd always be here. And then she wasn't.
Martha's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. I know, baby. I know.
She didn't break her promise on purpose, Annie continued, her voice taking on that too-old quality Martha had come to recognize. She got sick, and she tried to stay, but her body wouldn't let her. That's different from choosing to leave.
Yes, that's very different.
So if you leave, it would be because you chose to. Annie's eyes were sharp now, piercing. That would be worse than what Mama did. That would be on purpose.
Out of the mouths of babes,
Martha looked up at Josiah, who stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, his face a mask of pain and hope and something that looked almost like love. I won't choose to leave, Martha said finally, the words feeling like a vow. As long as you want me here, as long as your father allows it, I will keep coming back. What if the mean people make you go? Then I'll fight them. Annie considered this. You'd fight for us? Yes. Even though we're not your family? Martha cupped the child's face in her hands. Family isn't always about blood, sweetheart. Sometimes it's about choice. Sometimes it's about showing up every day, even when it's hard. And I choose to show up for you, for all of you.
Annie's smile was like the sun breaking through winter clouds.
I think, she said solemnly, you should definitely marry Papa.
Josiah coughed. Martha's face went crimson, and somewhere in the front room, Rosie's voice rang out.
What did Annie say? Did she say marry? Is Martha going to marry Papa? Eliza, did you hear that?
The chaos that followed, Rosie's excited interrogation, Eliza's mortified silence, Josiah's fumbling attempts at explanation, dissolved any remaining tension. By the time Martha finally managed to escape to the porch for some cold air and privacy, she was laughing despite herself.
She stood there, breathing in the frozen air, watching her breath plume white against the gray sky, and tried to untangle the knot of emotions in her chest. She should be horrified, should be running as fast as her legs could carry her, away from this impossible situation, these impossible feelings, this family that was starting to feel like her own. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt home. I should apologize for Annie. Josiah had followed her onto the porch. He stood a careful distance away, hands shoved in his pockets, breath fogging in the cold. She doesn't know what she's saying, he continued. She's 4. She doesn't understand how these things work. Maybe she understands better than we do. Josiah's head came up sharply. What? Martha kept her eyes on the distant mountains. She sees something between us. She's not wrong. Something's changed these past 2 weeks, and we both know it. Silence, long and heavy, filled with everything neither of them could say. I can't, Josiah finally said. Not yet. It's too soon. Catherine's only been gone 4 months, and the girls, they're still healing, and the town would... I know. Martha turned to face him. I'm not asking for anything, Josiah. I'm just saying, we can't pretend there's nothing here. That's not fair to either of us. So what do? We take it slow. We focus on the girls. We let whatever this is, breathe. And when the time is right, if the time is ever right, we figure out the rest. Josiah studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. You're a remarkable woman, Martha Goodwin. I'm a woman who makes good biscuits and happens to understand grief. There's nothing remarkable about that. There's everything remarkable about that. He moved closer, just 1 step, but it felt like a declaration. I'm not going to promise you anything, not yet, but I want you to know, whatever happens, Whatever the town says or does, you have a place here, with us, for as long as you want it." Martha's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "That's more than I ever expected." "It's less than you deserve." They stood there in the cold, not quite touching, not quite apart. Two wounded people finding their way towards something that might be healing. Then the front door banged open and Rosie burst out. "Martha! Martha, come quick!" Eliza's crying, and she won't tell us why, and she locked herself in the bedroom, and I tried to kick the door open, but it wouldn't work, and... Martha was moving before Rosie finished her sentence, Josiah right behind her. Eliza. The careful one. The controlled one. The girl who held everything inside had finally broken. And somehow, Martha knew, this would be the hardest rescue of them all. The door to the girl's bedroom was indeed locked. From within came the sound of muffled sobbing, raw, desperate sounds that spoke of grief held too long and released too suddenly. "Eliza?" Martha knocked gently. "Sweetheart, it's Martha. Can you open the door?" "Go away." The words were barely audible through the wood. "Just go away. I'm fine." "You're not fine, and that's okay. Nobody's fine all the time." "I said go away!" The venom in the young voice made Martha flint. Behind her, Josiah started forward, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Let me," she murmured. "This isn't about you." She slid down to sit with her back against the door, ignoring the cold floor, the awkward position, the ache in her knees. "I'm not going anywhere, Eliza. I'll sit right here until you're ready to talk. No pressure, no timeline. I've got all day." Silence from within, broken only by hiccuping sobs. "Did I ever tell you about my mother?" Martha continued, her voice conversational. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her in the summer, when everyone thought the worst was over. One day she was fine, and the next..." She trailed off, letting the memory wash over her. "I didn't cry at her funeral. Everyone thought I was so brave, so strong. My father kept saying how proud he was of his big girl, holding it together for her brothers, and I just stood there, frozen, because I knew if I started crying, I'd never stop." Behind her, she could feel Josiah's eyes on her back, could feel Annie and Rosie hovering in the hallway, listening. "I held it in for 3 months, Martha said. 3 months of being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. And then one day, I dropped a dish, just a stupid dish, nothing important, and it shattered on the floor, and I shattered right along with it." A small sound from behind the door. Almost a question. "I cried for 2 days straight," Martha continued. "Couldn't stop, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything but cry. My father was terrified. He thought I'd gone mad. But you know what? After those 2 days, I felt better, lighter, like all that grief I'd been carrying had finally found its way out." She leaned her head back against the door. "What I'm trying to say, Eliza, is that it's okay to break. It's okay to stop being strong. You've been carrying your family on your shoulders for 4 months, and you're only 10 years old. That's too much weight for anyone, let alone a child." Silence. Then, slowly, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack, and one red-rimmed eye appeared. "You really cried for 2 days?" Eliza asked, her voice hoarse. 2 days, 3 hours, and approximately 17 minutes. Not that I was counting. A sound escaped Eliza, half laugh, half sob. The door opened wider. The girl looked wrecked. Her face was swollen, her hair disheveled, her carefully maintained composure completely destroyed. She looked, for the first time since Martha had met her, like the child she actually was. "I don't know how to stop," Eliza whispered. "Being strong, taking care of everyone. I don't know how to stop." Martha held out her arms. "Then let me show you." Eliza collapsed into her embrace, and the sobs that came were different from Rosie's explosive grief, or Annie's quiet tears. These were deep, wrenching things, the sound of a child who'd been pretending to be an adult for far too long. Martha held her through all of it. Didn't tell her to hush, didn't tell her it would be okay. Just held on while the storm raged. At some point, she felt other small bodies join them. Annie pressed against her side. Rosie wrapped her arms around both Martha and Eliza. And Josiah sank down beside them, his large hand covering Martha's where it rested on Eliza's back. A family. Broken and healing and perfectly imperfect. When the tears finally slowed, Eliza pulled back and looked at Martha with something new in her eyes. Something that looked almost like trust. "I'm scared," she admitted. "All the time. I'm scared that something bad will happen again, and I won't be able to stop it, and everyone will leave, and I'll be alone." "You won't be alone," Martha said firmly. "You have your father, your sisters, and you have me." "But you're not our mother." "No, I'm not." Martha cupped Eliza's face in her hands. "I'm not trying to replace your mother. No one could ever do that. But I can be here for you. I can help carry the weight. I can give you permission to be a child again. Because that's what you are, Eliza. A child. And children shouldn't have to be strong all the time." Eliza's lower lip trembled. "What if you leave?" "I already promised Annie I wouldn't choose to leave. I'm making you the same promise." "Promises break." "Some do, but this one won't." Martha pulled all three girls close, feeling their hearts beat against hers, feeling their breath warm on her skin. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Whatever happens, whatever comes, I'm staying right here. Do you believe me?" Annie nodded immediately. Rosie followed suit. And finally, slowly, Eliza nodded too. "I believe you," she whispered. And Martha Goodwin, holding three children who weren't hers, in a house that wasn't home, felt something click into place in her chest, something that felt like forever, something that felt like family. The trouble arrived on a Sunday, 6 weeks after Martha first knelt in the snow and offered Annie a cookie. She should have expected it. Nothing good ever lasted in Silver Creek. Not for women like her, anyway. But she'd let herself get comfortable, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this family, this purpose, this feeling of finally belonging somewhere. She was a fool. The morning started beautifully. Martha had stayed the night again, the 4th time that week, because the snow had been relentless, and Josiah refused to let her walk home in the dark. She woke to Annie's warm body curled against her side, to Rosie's feet somehow wedged under her pillow, to Eliza sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She woke to something that felt dangerously like happiness. Josiah was already in the kitchen when she came downstairs, coffee brewing, fire crackling. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face made her heart stutter. "Morning," he said. "Morning." They'd gotten good at this, the small intimacies of domesticity. She'd fix breakfast while he read the paper. The girls would tumble downstairs in various states of wakefulness. They'd eat together, laugh together, exist together in a way that felt natural and right. Like a family. "Church today," Josiah said, and Martha's stomach dropped. She'd been avoiding church for 3 years. The whispers were bad enough in the market. She couldn't imagine facing them in God's house. "I could stay here, watch the girls while you—" "No." Josiah set down his coffee cup. "We go together. All of us." "Josiah." "I'm tired of hiding, Martha. Tired of pretending we're not what we are." He moved closer, his eyes intense. "Whatever you and I have become, whatever this family is becoming, it's real. And I won't be ashamed of it." "I'm not asking you to be ashamed. I'm asking you to be smart." Smart would have been letting my daughters fade away while the good people of Silver Creek offered prayers and casseroles.
His voice hardened. Smart hasn't done me any favors. I'd rather be brave. Martha opened her mouth to argue, but Annie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Are we going to church today, Papa? Josiah looked at Martha. A question, a challenge. She thought about all the reasons to say no. The whispers, the judgment, the way Prudence Whitmore would look at her like she was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. Then she thought about 3 little girls who needed to see that love was worth fighting for. Yes, she heard herself say, we're going to church. The ride into town was quiet. The girls sat in the wagon bed, bundled in blankets, while Martha sat beside Josiah on the bench seat. His hand found hers somewhere along the way, and she didn't pull back. Let them see, she thought. Let them all see. Silver Creek's church was a small white building at the heart of town, its steeple reaching toward a gray winter sky. By the time they arrived, the yard was already full of families in their Sunday best, greeting each other with the practiced warmth of people who'd known each other too long. The moment Josiah's wagon appeared, the warmth evaporated. Heads turned, whispers started. Martha felt the weight of 100 eyes as Josiah helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering on her waist, just a moment longer than necessary. Mr. Cole, Thomas Brennan, Josiah's foreman, tipped his hat. Mrs. Goodwin, fine morning for worship. That it is, Tom. Josiah's voice was steady. Girls, say hello to Mr. Brennan. Hello, Mr. Brennan, the 3 girls chorused, Annie's voice slightly louder than her sister's. The crowd parted reluctantly as they walked toward the church doors. Martha kept her spine straight, her chin high, even as the whispers grew louder. Shameless! In front of those children! Poor Catherine must be spinning in her grave. What does he see in that fat? Enough! Josiah's voice cracked through the murmurs like a whip. He'd stopped walking, his body rigid with barely contained fury. Anyone else have something to say? Speak up. I'd love to hear it to my face instead of behind my back. Silence. Complete and devastating. That's what I thought. Josiah put his hand on the small of Martha's back and guided her forward. Let's go find our seats. They made it inside, found a pew near the middle, settled the girls between them, and for a moment Martha thought maybe it would be all right. Then Prudence Whitmore arrived. She swept in like a queen, her husband the Reverend trailing behind her. Her eyes found Martha immediately, and the smile that crossed her face was the coldest thing Martha had ever seen. Well, well, Prudence said, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent church. Look who's decided to grace us with her presence, and in the company of Mr. Cole and his daughters, no less. Mrs. Whitmore. Josiah's tone could have frozen the baptismal font. I wasn't aware attendance required your approval. It doesn't. But surely you understand how this looks. Prudence gestured at Martha, her lip curling with distaste. An unmarried woman spending nights at your ranch, playing mother to your children? It's hardly appropriate. What's not appropriate is you making a scene in God's house. I'm not making a scene. I'm expressing concern for your immortal soul. Prudence's eyes glittered. And for those poor children being exposed to such influences. Annie tugged at Martha's sleeve. Why is the mean lady talking about you? The innocent question rang through the church like a bell. Prudence's face flushed. I'm not mean, child. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Annie's brow furrowed. Martha makes us breakfast. She reads us stories. She helped Eliza stop being so sad, and Rosie stop being so mad. Why would we need protecting from that? Several people in the congregation shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Prudence's smile turned brittle. Children don't understand the complexities of adult relationships. They don't know what kind of woman Mrs. Goodwin really is. What kind of woman is she? Eliza spoke up now, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. She's kind. She's patient. She's the only person who actually helped us when Mama died. What kind of woman is that, Mrs. Whitmore? The kind who preys on grieving families. Prudence spat the words. The kind who uses tragedy to insert herself where she doesn't belong. The kind who... That's enough. Reverend Whitmore finally stepped forward, his face troubled. Prudence, this isn't the time or place. The time and place is exactly when sin is parading itself in public, Nathaniel. There's no sin here. Josiah rose to his feet, and Martha saw his hands trembling with rage. There's a woman who saved my daughters' lives. A woman who walked 5 miles through snow every day to bring them breakfast. A woman who held them when they cried, and stayed when everyone else left. He looked around the church, meeting eyes that tried to look away. Where were all of you when Eliza was trying to hold this family together at 10 years old? Where were you when Rosie was so angry she couldn't speak without screaming? Where were you when Annie stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped wanting to live? His voice cracked. You brought casseroles, you offered prayers, and then you went home to your own families while mine was falling apart. But this woman you're so eager to condemn, she stayed. She fought for my children when nobody else would. And I will not stand here and let you tear her down for it. The church was absolutely silent. Martha stood slowly, her legs shaking. Josiah, don't... No. He took her hand, right there in front of everyone. I'm done hiding. I'm done caring what they think. I love you, Martha Goodwin. I love you, and my daughters love you. And if this town can't accept that, then this town can go straight to hell. The gasp that went through the congregation was almost comical. Prudence looked like she might actually faint, and Martha felt tears streaming down her face, because no one had ever stood up for her like that. No one had ever chosen her so publicly, so completely, so without reservation. You can't mean that, she whispered. I've never meant anything more. Annie grabbed Martha's other hand. See, I told you Papa loves you. Now you have to marry him. You have to. Despite everything, the staring crowd, the hostile whispers, the precariousness of this moment, Martha laughed. A real laugh, bright and sudden and full of something that felt like hope. You're impossible, she told Josiah. Probably. Will you marry me anyway? The words hung in the air. Martha's heart stopped. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. He reached someone who would love my family as fiercely as she did. His eyes met hers. I can't think of anyone more worthy than you. Josiah, Martha's voice broke. The whole town is watching. Let them watch. Let them see what love looks like when it's real. He got down on one knee, right there in the middle of the church, surrounded by scandalized whispers and disapproving glares, and 3 little girls holding their breath. Martha Goodwin, will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Will you be a mother to my daughters? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you? Martha looked at him, this hard man who'd learned to be soft, this grieving father who'd chosen hope over despair, and felt the last of her walls crumble. Yes, she whispered. Then, louder. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Annie shrieked with joy. Rosie pumped her fist in the air. And Eliza, careful, guarded Eliza, threw her arms around Martha and held on like she'd never let go. The ring slid onto Martha's finger like it had been waiting for her all along. This is outrageous, Prudence's voice cut through the celebration. Reverend, you can't possibly allow this. You can't sanction a union between this man and that... That what, Mrs. Whitmore? Reverend Whitmore's voice was quiet, but it silenced his wife immediately. That kind woman? That devoted caretaker? That person who has shown more Christian charity in 6 weeks than most of us manage in a lifetime? Prudence sputtered. She doesn't... Look at her, Nathaniel. I am looking at her.
The Reverend's gaze moved to Martha, and there was something like respect in his eyes. "I'm looking at a woman who loves those children without condition. A woman who stayed when staying was hard. A woman who is about to become a wife and mother, despite every obstacle this town has thrown in her path." He turned to address the congregation. "I've known many of you my entire life. I've baptized your children, blessed your marriages, buried your dead. And in all that time, I've never seen faith demonstrated more clearly than what I've witnessed these past weeks at the Cole Ranch." His voice strengthened. "Faith isn't just about Sunday services and proper appearances. It's about showing up for people when they need you. It's about loving the unlovable, welcoming the outcast, seeing dignity in those the world has discarded." He looked directly at his wife. "It's about choosing kindness over cruelty, even when cruelty is easier." Prudence's face went white. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm tired of watching my wife use God's name to justify her prejudices." The Reverend's voice was gentle but unyielding. "I dare because 3 little girls found healing through a woman we tried to destroy. I dare because love just won, right here in this church, and I refuse to stand against it." He turned to Josiah and Martha. "When would you like to be married? I'm available this afternoon." The murmur that went through the crowd was different now. Less hostile, more confused. Some faces showed shame. Others showed something that might have been the beginning of acceptance. "Today?" Martha's voice was faint. "We can't. There's no preparation, no dress, no—" "I don't need preparation." Josiah squeezed her hand. "I just need you." "But the girls—" "The girls are right here." He looked at his daughters, still clustered around Martha like she was the center of their universe. "What do you say? Want to watch Papa get married today?" "Yes!" Annie practically vibrated with excitement.
"Can I be the flower girl? Can I throw flowers? Can I wear my blue dress, the one with the ribbons?"
"You can wear whatever you want, sweetheart." "I want to hold the rings," Rosie announced. "That's an important job. I can be trusted with important jobs." "Yes, you can." Everyone looked at Eliza. The eldest girl was still holding Martha's arm, her face unreadable. "Eliza?" Josiah's voice was gentle. "What do you think?" For a long moment, Eliza didn't answer. Martha's heart clenched with fear. If Eliza said no, if she wasn't ready, if this was too much, too soon, "I think," Eliza said slowly, "that Mama would have liked Martha. I think she would have been glad someone was taking care of us. I think—" her voice cracked. "I think it's okay to be happy again. I think Mama would want us to be happy." Martha pulled the girl into her arms, tears streaming freely now. "She would," Martha whispered. "She absolutely would." The wedding happened 3 hours later. It wasn't fancy. Martha wore her green dress, the same one she'd worn to church that morning. The girls picked winter wildflowers from the field behind the church. Tom Brennan served as best man. Old Bessie Turner, the only woman in town who'd ever shown Martha kindness, stood as her witness. And Prudence Whitmore sat in the back pew, silent and furious, watching her empire of judgment crumble. "Do you, Josiah Abraham Cole, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Martha Ellen Goodwin, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Martha looked at Josiah, at his daughters, at this family she'd somehow stumbled into, this life she'd never dared to hope for. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Whitmore smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Josiah's kiss was soft and sure and tasted like forever. When they broke apart, Annie was jumping up and down. Rosie was making exaggerated gagging sounds, and Eliza was crying silent, happy tears. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Josiah Cole," the Reverend announced. "May God bless this union and this family." The applause that followed was thin but genuine. Not everyone joined in, but enough did. Enough to matter. As they walked back down the aisle, husband and wife now, a family in every legal and moral sense, Martha caught Prudence's eye. The older woman's face was twisted with fury and something else, something that looked almost like fear. Martha smiled at her. Not in triumph, not in malice, just a simple acknowledgement of victory. Prudence looked away first. That evening, back at the ranch that was now truly her home, Martha stood in the kitchen making dinner while her daughters, set the table. Her daughters. The words still didn't quite feel real.
"You're smiling," Josiah said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "You've been smiling for hours. It's starting to worry me."
Can't a woman smile on her wedding day? A woman can do anything she wants on her wedding day. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I just want to make sure you're not having second thoughts."
Second thoughts about marrying a stubborn rancher with 3 wild daughters and half a town ready to run me out on a rail? Martha pretended to consider. "No second thoughts so far."
"Good." His arms tightened. "Because I have no intention of letting you go. Ever."
"Careful. That sounds like a promise."
"It is a promise." He turned her around to face him, his expression serious now. "I know today was hard. I know Prudence tried to destroy us.
I know there'll be more battles ahead, more people who can't accept what we have.
I know. But I want you to understand something, Martha." His hands cupped her face. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we face it together. You and me and the girls. A family." "A family," Martha repeated. "Family dinner," Annie's voice rang out from the dining room. "Everyone come eat. Eliza says the food's getting cold, and Rosie already tried to steal a biscuit." "I did not." "Did too."
"I saw you," Martha laughed and pulled away from Josiah.
"We'd better go before they destroy the kitchen. They're your daughters now, too. Whatever they destroy, it's half your fault." Joy, but she was still smiling as she walked into the dining room, still smiling as she sat down at the table, surrounded by chaos and noise and love. This was her life now. This was her family. And despite everything, the whispers that would continue, the battles that lay ahead, the constant low-grade fear that she didn't deserve this happiness, Martha Goodwin Cole allowed herself to believe, for the first time in 3 long years, that maybe she did. Maybe she finally did. The peace lasted exactly 12 days. Martha should have known better than to trust it. Happiness had never been something she could hold for long. It always slipped through her fingers like water, leaving her cold and empty. But those 12 days were the closest thing to heaven she'd ever experienced on earth. She woke each morning in Josiah's arms, in a bed that was now truly hers. She made breakfast for her daughters. She still couldn't say it without her heart catching. And listened to their chatter and their laughter and their small, everyday complaints.
She learned that Eliza liked her eggs scrambled soft, that Rosie would eat anything covered in honey, that Annie had started asking for seconds without being prompted. She learned what it felt like to be loved. But on the 13th morning, Josiah rode into town for supplies and came back with a face like thunder. "What happened?" Martha asked, meeting him at the door while the girls played in the front room. He didn't answer immediately. Just pulled off his gloves, hung up his coat, moved through the motions of coming home without meeting her eyes. "Josiah, talk to me." Prudence has been busy. His voice was flat, controlled in a way that scared her more than anger would have. "She's been writing letters to the territorial authority, to the church board in Helena, even to the newspaper in Butte." Martha's stomach dropped. Letters about what? About us. About the scandalous circumstances of our marriage. About how I'm an unfit father and you're a... He stopped, jaw clenching. She's calling for an investigation. Claims I've been mentally compromised by grief and that you manipulated your way into our family. That's insane. That's Prudence. Josiah finally looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was worse than anything she'd imagined. She wants to take the girls, Martha. She's petitioning to have them removed from our care. The world tilted. Martha grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. She can't. They're your daughters. Our daughters now. She has no legal standing. She has the church. She has connections. She has a husband who, despite everything, still has influence. Josiah's hands were shaking, and she has 3 years of documented concern about my parenting since Catherine died. Documented concern? Every time she visited with a casserole, and I turned her away. Every time she offered to help with the children, and I said no. Every time I refused her charity because I knew it came with strings attached. He laughed bitterly. She kept records, Martha. Notes on every interaction. Observations about the girl's behavior. She's been building a case against me for years. Martha's legs gave out. She sank onto the bench by the door, her mind racing. There has to be something we can do. Someone we can talk to. The Reverend. The Reverend is her husband. However much he might disagree with her privately, he can't publicly oppose her without destroying his own position. Then we'll fight. We'll hire a lawyer from Helena. We'll... With what money? Josiah's voice cracked. The ranch is barely breaking even. After last year's losses, after the funeral expenses, after everything, I don't have the resources to fight a prolonged legal battle. Then we sell something. The horses, the back pasture, whatever it takes. It won't be enough. He crossed to her, knelt down, took her hands in his. Martha, I need you to understand what we're facing. Prudence isn't just trying to embarrass us. She's trying to destroy us. And she has the power to do it. Martha stared at his face, this face she'd come to love so fiercely, and felt something cold settle into her bones. This is my fault, she whispered. No. Yes. If I hadn't come here, if I hadn't inserted myself into your family, then my daughters would be dead. Josiah's grip tightened almost painfully. Annie wasn't eating. Eliza was breaking under pressure. Rosie was so angry she was becoming dangerous. You saved them, Martha. Whatever happens now, that doesn't change. But if I leave... Don't. The word was sharp, desperate. Don't you dare finish that sentence. If I leave, she loses her ammunition. The improper influence disappears. The scandal dies down. You keep your daughters. And lose my wife? Lose the only person who's made this house feel like a home in over a year? Josiah shook his head violently. No. I won't sacrifice you to appease that woman. I won't teach my daughters that love should be abandoned when things get hard. It's not about what should be. It's about what is. Martha. Mama? They both turned. Eliza stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes too knowing for a 10-year-old. I heard you talking, she said quietly. Is the mean lady trying to take us away? Martha opened her mouth to lie, to protect, to do what adults always did when children asked hard questions. But Eliza's eyes stopped her. This girl had watched her mother die, had spent months holding her family together through sheer force of will. She deserved the truth. Yes, Martha said. Mrs. Whitmore is trying to take you away. Eliza's chin came up. She can't. We won't let her. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Why not? Eliza crossed to them, her small hands balling into fists. You're our mama now.
Papa married you. We're a family. Doesn't that mean anything?
It means everything. But sometimes the world doesn't care about what's right. Sometimes,
Then we make it care.
Eliza's voice rose.
We fight. We tell everyone the truth about what Martha did for us. We make them see.
It's not that easy, Josiah said gently.
You told me to stop being scared all the time.
Eliza turned on him, tears streaming down her cheeks.
You told me it was okay to let other people help carry the weight. Well, I'm not scared anymore. And I'm not going to let some mean old lady take our family away just because she's jealous and horrible.
Jealous? Martha blinked.
That's what Bessie Turner said. I heard her talking to Mr. Brennan at church.
Eliza wiped her face with the back of her hand.
She said Mrs. Whitmore has been in love with Papa for years.
That she was furious when he married Mama instead of her. That she's been waiting for a chance to get back at him ever since. Martha looked at Josiah, who had gone very still.
Is that true?
Maybe, I don't know. There was a time, before Catherine, when Prudence was... He trailed off, looking sick. I never encouraged it. I never gave her reason to hope. But she's the kind of woman who doesn't need encouragement to believe she's owed something.
So this isn't about me at all,
Martha said slowly. It's about her wounded pride, her jealousy. Does it matter? The result is the same. It matters because jealousy makes people sloppy. Martha's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. It matters because a woman acting out of wounded vanity will have made mistakes, will have enemies, will have left a trail of people she's hurt, who might be willing to speak against her.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Martha stood, feeling something fierce and determined kindle in her chest. Prudence Whitmore has spent years building a case against you. Fine. Let's spend the next few weeks building a case against her. Josiah stared at her. You want to fight. I want to protect my family. She met his eyes steadily. You said you loved me because I was strong, because I stayed when staying was hard. Well, I'm staying now, Josiah, and I'm fighting. Are you with me? Something shifted in his expression. The despair faded, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. I'm with you. Always. Good. Martha turned to Eliza. Sweetheart, go get your sisters. We're having a family meeting. The family meeting happened in the kitchen, because that's where the Cole family always came together now. Annie sat on Martha's lap. Rosie perched on the counter, despite being told twice to get down. Eliza stood by her father's side, looking older than her years. Here's what's happening, Martha said, her voice calm and clear. A woman named Mrs. Whitmore is trying to tell lies about our family. She wants to take you girls away from your papa and me. Why? Rosie's voice was explosive with outrage. Because she's a bully, and bullies hurt people when they don't get what they want. Then we should punch her, Rosie said decisively. That's what you do with bullies.
We're not going to punch anyone. Martha almost smiled. We're going to be smarter than that. We're going to find people who know the truth about Mrs. Whitmore. People she's hurt before. People who might be willing to tell their stories. Like what kind of stories? Eliza asked. I don't know yet. But everyone has a past, sweetheart. Everyone has made enemies. And a woman as cruel as Prudence Whitmore has probably made more than most. Annie tugged on Martha's sleeve. Will the mean lady take us away from you?
No. Martha's voice was fierce. I won't let that happen. None of us will. Promise? There was that word again. That terrifying, beautiful word that kept demanding things from her. I promise to fight with everything I have, Martha said carefully. I promise to never give up. I promise that whatever happens, we face it together. Annie considered this, then nodded. That's a good promise.
I think so too.
The next few weeks were the hardest of Martha's life, and that was saying something, considering all she'd survived. She started with Bessie Turner, the old woman who'd served as her witness at the wedding. Bessie was 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and had lived in Silver Creek longer than almost anyone. "Prudence Whitmore," Bessie said, sipping tea in Martha's kitchen. "Lord, where do I even start?" "Start wherever you like. I need to know everything." Bessie's eyes glittered. 20 years ago, Prudence was Prudence Harmon. Her daddy owned the general store, same one the Whitmores run now. She was beautiful back then, if you can believe it. Had every young man in the territory sniffing around. Including Josiah? Including Josiah's older brother, actually, William Cole. He was the one everyone expected to inherit the ranch. Bessie's mouth twisted. He died in a riding accident 6 months before he was supposed to marry Prudence.
Some folks said it wasn't an accident at all. Martha's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean, William Cole told his brother he was having second thoughts about the engagement. Said Prudence wasn't the woman he thought she was. Said he'd seen things that worried him." Bessie shrugged. 2 days later, he was dead. His horse threw him, or that's what they said. You think Prudence had something to do with it? I think Prudence Harmon is the kind of woman who doesn't lose gracefully. I think she'd already planned her whole life around being Mrs. William Cole. And when that was threatened, Bessie let the sentence hang. Nothing was ever proved, mind you. But Josiah's father never trusted her after that. And when Josiah came of age, he made sure his son knew to steer clear. That's why she hates him so much. It's not just rejection. It's the whole family. The Coles took everything from her. The husband she'd planned on. The ranch she'd expected to run. The social position she felt entitled to.
Bessie leaned forward. Prudence married Nathaniel Whitmore because he was the only respectable option left. But she's never forgiven anyone for what she sees as her stolen life. Martha processed this, her mind working furiously. Is there anyone else? Other people she's hurt? Honey, there's a whole list. The Miller family. She started rumors that destroyed their daughter's reputation because the girl was prettier than her. The Hendricks. She drove them out of business because they wouldn't extend her credit. I need names. I need people who will talk. Bessie studied her for a long moment. You're serious about this? I'm deadly serious. Then you should know, Prudence won't take this lying down. The moment she realizes you're building a case against her, she'll come at you with everything she has. Let her. Martha's voice was steel. I've survived worse than Prudence Whitmore.
The names Bessie provided led to more names, and those names led to others. Martha spent her days traveling to neighboring ranches and homesteads, talking to anyone who would listen, collecting stories of Prudence's cruelty and manipulation. The pattern that emerged was damning. A young woman driven to near suicide by malicious gossip. A family bankrupted by false accusations. A hired hand fired and blacklisted because he'd rebuffed Prudence's advances. Story after story of a woman who used her position to destroy anyone who crossed her. But collecting stories was only half the battle. Martha also needed to prove that she and Josiah were fit parents, that the girls were thriving under their care. Dr. Samuel Gray provided the medical evidence. Those children are healthier than I've ever seen them, he said, signing a letter to that effect. Annie's gained nearly 5 pounds. Eliza's stopped having headaches. Rosie's temper tantrums have decreased significantly. Whatever you're doing, Mrs. Cole, keep doing it. Thomas Brennan provided character testimony. I've worked for Josiah Cole for 8 years, he said. He's the finest man I know. And Martha, Mrs. Cole, she's transformed that household. Those little girls worship her, and they should. She's given them back their childhood. Even Reverend Whitmore, in a quiet moment after Sunday service,
offered his support.
"I can't publicly oppose my wife," he said, his face troubled. "But I can tell you this. Whatever statements she's made to the territorial authority, I did not sign them. And if it comes to a hearing, I will not lie."
"Will you tell the truth?" Martha pressed. The Reverend was silent for a long moment. "I'll tell the truth," he finally said. "God forgive me, but I'll tell the truth." The hearing was scheduled for the first week of December, 2 weeks before Christmas, as if Prudence had deliberately chosen the cruelest possible timing. Martha prepared obsessively. She organized testimonies, gathered evidence, rehearsed arguments. She barely slept, barely ate, ran on nothing but determination and fear. The night before the hearing, she found herself standing in the girls' bedroom, watching them sleep. Annie was curled in a ball, thumb in her mouth, a habit she'd broken months ago, but had recently resumed. Rosie sprawled across her mattress, one arm hanging off the edge, defiant even in unconsciousness. And Eliza lay rigid and still, her face peaceful, but her body ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Her daughters. Her beautiful, broken, healing daughters. "I won't let her take you," Martha whispered. "I swear it." "They know." She turned. Josiah stood in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. "They know you'll fight for them," he continued, moving to stand beside her. "That's why they're able to sleep at all. What if it's not enough? What if we lose? Then we appeal. We fight again. We keep fighting until there's no fight left." His hand found hers in the darkness. "But we won't lose, Martha. I believe that." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've seen what you can do." He turned her to face him, his eyes intense, even in the dim light. "I've seen you bring my daughters back from the dead. I've seen you face down the whole town's judgment without flinching. I've seen you turn this house from a tomb into a home." His voice dropped. "If anyone can beat Prudence Whitmore, it's you." Martha leaned into him, letting his strength shore up her own. "I'm scared, Josiah." "I know. I've never had anything worth fighting for before. Not really. And now that I do—" "Now that you do, you're terrified of losing it." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I understand. I feel the same way." They stood there in silence, holding each other while their daughters slept, gathering strength for the battle to come. The hearing room was smaller than Martha expected. Just a cramped office in the Territorial Authority building, with a single desk and too few chairs. Judge Harrison, a tired-looking man with steel-gray hair, presided with obvious reluctance. "I want to state for the record that I find this entire proceeding distasteful," he said as everyone settled. "But formal complaints have been filed, and they must be addressed." Prudence sat on one side of the room, flanked by 2 church elders and a lawyer from Helena who looked expensive and bored. She wore black, as always, her face arranged in an expression of pious concern. Martha and Josiah sat on the other side, with their own small army. Bessie Turner, Dr. Gray, Thomas Brennan, and a dozen others who'd agreed to testify. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge began, "you filed a petition claiming that Mr. Cole is an unfit parent and that his children should be removed from his care. Please state your concerns." Prudence rose gracefully. "Your Honor, my concerns are numerous and well documented. Since his wife's tragic death, Mr. Cole has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment and emotional instability. He has refused the community's assistance, isolated his children from proper society, and most troublingly, has invited a woman of questionable reputation into his home." "You're referring to Mrs. Cole?" "I'm referring to Martha Goodwin, as she was known before her hasty and improper marriage." Prudence's voice dripped venom. "A woman who was shunned by decent society for years. A woman who, by her own neighbors' accounts, neglected her health to such a degree that she caused the death of her own unborn child." Martha flinched. Josiah's hand found hers under the table, squeezing tight. "Mrs. Cole," the judge said, You'll have your chance to respond. Please continue, Mrs. Whitmore. Prudence outlined her case with practiced precision. The documented concerns she'd been gathering for years. The inappropriate living arrangement before the marriage. The rushed and irregular wedding ceremony. Each point was delivered with just enough truth to sting and just enough distortion to wound. When she finished, the judge turned to Martha. Mrs. Cole, how do you respond to these allegations? Martha stood. Her legs were trembling, but her voice was steady. Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness. What followed was unlike anything Silver Creek had ever seen. One by one, Martha's witnesses took the stand. Dr. Gray testified about the girl's remarkable improvement. Thomas Brennan spoke about the transformation in the Cole household. Bessie Turner recounted story after story of Prudence's cruelty over the years. But the most powerful testimony came from the most unexpected source. I call Reverend Nathaniel Whitmore to the stand. The room went absolutely silent. Prudence's face drained of color. Nathaniel? Her voice was a warning. What are you doing? The Reverend stood slowly, his expression agonized, but resolved. I'm telling the truth, he said quietly. Finally. He walked to the witness chair and sat down, avoiding his wife's eyes. Reverend Whitmore, Martha said, in your opinion, are the Cole children in any danger in their current home? No, his voice was clear. Those children are thriving. I've watched them transform over the past months, from grieving, damaged little girls into happy, healthy children. Martha Cole is the reason for that transformation. And your wife's claims about Mrs. Cole's character? The Reverend was silent for a long moment. Then he said, my wife's claims are motivated by personal vendetta, not genuine concern. She has harbored resentment toward the Cole family for over 20 years, and she has used her position in the church to pursue that resentment at every opportunity. Nathaniel! Prudence's voice was shrill now. How dare you? Mrs. Whitmore, you'll remain silent, the judge interrupted. Continue, Reverend. I should have spoken up years ago, the Reverend's voice cracked. I should have stopped her when she destroyed the Miller girl's reputation, when she drove the Hendricks out of business, when she spread lies about Martha Goodwin's stillborn child. He finally looked at his wife. I was a coward, Prudence. I let you use God's name to justify your cruelty because it was easier than confronting you. But I won't do it anymore. Not when children's lives are at stake. The silence that followed was deafening. Prudence's face had gone from white to red to something approaching purple. Her carefully maintained composure was crumbling, and with it, her entire case. Your Honor, she sputtered. My husband is obviously confused. The stress of Mrs. Whitmore. The judge's voice was ice. I've heard enough. He shuffled his papers, his expression grim. Based on the testimony presented today, I find no evidence that the Cole children are in any danger. To the contrary, I find that they are being raised in a loving, stable home by parents who clearly have their best interests at heart. He looked directly at Prudence. Furthermore, I find the petitioner's claims to be motivated not by genuine concern, but by personal animosity. This court does not exist to settle old grudges or punish people for living their lives in ways you disapprove of. Your Honor, the petition is denied. The judge stood. Case closed. Martha's legs gave out. She sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face, as the room erupted around her. They'd won. Against all odds, against all expectations, they'd won. Josiah pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. You did it, he whispered. You saved us. We did it together. No. He pulled back to look at her face. You. All you. You fought for this family when you could have walked away. You built a case when everyone said it was hopeless. You found the courage to stand up in that room and— Josiah. What? Martha smiled through her tears. Take me home. The ride home felt different than any journey Martha had ever taken. The same road she'd walked 100 times, trudging through snow with her basket of baked goods and her desperate hope. The same fields, the same fences, the same mountains rising blue and distant against the winter sky. But everything had changed. She'd won. Not just the hearing, though that victory still felt unreal, still made her hands shake when she thought about how close they'd come to losing everything. She'd won something bigger, something she'd stopped believing was possible years ago. She'd won the right to belong. You're quiet, Josiah said, his hand finding hers on the wagon seat. Everything all right? Everything's perfect. Martha leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. I'm just trying to remember how to breathe. Take your time. We've got nothing but time now. The girls were waiting on the porch when they arrived, having been left with Thomas Brennan during the hearing. Annie spotted the wagon first and let out a shriek that probably scared every bird within a mile. They're back! They're back! She flew off the porch, Rosie right behind her, both of them racing toward the wagon with abandon. Only Eliza hung back, her face pale with anxiety, searching Martha's expression for the verdict. We won! Martha called out, and watched relief flood the girl's features. It's over, sweetheart. We won! Eliza's composure cracked. She ran, actually ran, down the porch steps and threw herself into Martha's arms the moment Martha climbed down from the wagon. I was so scared, Eliza whispered against Martha's chest. I tried not to be, but I was so scared. I know, baby. I was scared too. But you did it anyway. You fought anyway. That's what family does. Martha stroked the girl's hair. We fight for each other. Always. Annie and Rosie joined the embrace, making it a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. Josiah wrapped himself around all of them, creating a shelter of warmth against the winter cold. Group hug, Annie announced unnecessarily. Best group hug ever. The best, Martha agreed, her voice thick with emotion. The very best. That night, they celebrated. It wasn't fancy, just Martha's best cooking, the girls' favorite songs, stories told around the fire until everyone was too tired to keep their eyes open. But it felt like the grandest celebration in the world. Tell us about the hearing, Rosie demanded, bouncing on her chair. Tell us how you beat the mean lady. The word still made Martha's heart skip every single time. What's going to happen to Mrs. Whitmore? Annie asked, her brow furrowed. Is she going to jail? No, sweetheart. She didn't break any laws. She just— Martha searched for words a 4-year-old could understand. She made bad choices, and now everyone knows about them. Is she going to be mean to us again? I don't think so. I think she's going to be too busy dealing with the consequences of her choices to bother us anymore. This was true, as far as Martha knew. In the days following the hearing, Prudence Whitmore had become something of a pariah. The testimony about her years of cruelty had spread through Silver Creek like wildfire, and suddenly, people who'd been afraid to speak up were sharing their own stories. The Millers, the Hendricks, a dozen other families who'd suffered under Prudence's reign of terror. They came forward one by one, and with each story, Prudence's power diminished. Because when you're happy, everybody's happy. That's what Eliza says. Martha looked at her eldest daughter, who was blushing furiously. Eliza's very wise, Martha said. I know, Annie agreed. She's the wisest person ever. Except for you. The months that followed were the sweetest of Martha's life. Winter softened into spring, and with it came 1,000 small miracles. Annie's nightmares faded until they stopped entirely. The desperate intensity of their early days mellowed into something richer, a partnership built on shared labor and shared joy, and the quiet intimacy of two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. "I never thought I'd have this," she told him one night, lying in his arms while moonlight streamed through the window. "After Thomas died, after the baby, I thought that was it. I thought I'd used up whatever happiness I was allotted." "That's not how happiness works." "I know that now." She pressed closer to him. "You taught me that." "You taught yourself. I just provided the opportunity." Martha laughed softly. "Is that what we're calling it? An opportunity?" "A gift," Josiah amended. "A miracle. A second chance neither of us deserved, but both of us needed." He kissed her hair. "I love you, Martha Cole, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again." "I love you too." It was the simplest truth she knew. The foundation everything else was built on. Spring turned to summer, and summer brought changes of its own. Martha noticed it first in small ways. A queasiness in the mornings that she blamed on the heat. A tiredness that seemed excessive even for the busy season. A tenderness in her body that she tried to ignore until ignoring it became impossible. She didn't tell Josiah right away. Couldn't find the words, couldn't bear to voice the hope that had taken root in her chest. What if she was wrong? What if something went wrong? What if she lost another baby? But Dr. Gray confirmed what she already knew, and suddenly there was no hiding it anymore. "You're certain?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "As certain as I can be," the doctor smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Cole. You're going to have a baby." A baby. After everything. After 3 years of grief and loneliness and believing she would never be a mother. After burying the tiny body of her firstborn in the cold spring ground. A baby, she told Josiah that night after the girls were asleep. Sat him down at the kitchen table and took both his hands and said the words before she could lose her nerve. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was absolute. Josiah stared at her, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then, finally, gloriously, joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." He pulled her into his arms so fiercely it almost hurt. "Martha, oh God, Martha." "I'm scared," she admitted against his shoulder. "After last time." "I know." He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes bright with tears. "I know you're scared. But this time is different. This time you're not alone. This time you have me and the girls and everyone who loves you." "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we face it together. Whatever happens, we face it together." He cupped her face in his hands. "That's what family does, remember?" Martha let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. "Yes," she said. "That's what family does." Telling the girls was an experience Martha would never forget. She gathered them in the kitchen after breakfast, Josiah at her side, both of them practically vibrating with nervous excitement. "We have something to tell you," Martha began. "You're having a baby!" Annie shouted before she could finish. Martha's jaw dropped. "How did you—" "Eliza figured it out," Rosie said, rolling her eyes. "She said you were acting weird and getting sick in the mornings, and that's what happened before Mama had Annie." Martha looked at Eliza, who was blushing but smiling. "I wasn't sure," Eliza admitted, "but I hoped." "So it's true?" Rosie demanded. "We're getting a brother or sister?" "It's true." The eruption of noise that followed was deafening. Annie screamed. Rosie jumped on her chair. Even Eliza let out a whoop of excitement. "I want a brother," Annie announced. "I want to name him Horsey." "That's a terrible name," Rosie said. "We should name him Warrior or Dragon." "What if it's a girl?" Eliza asked. "Then we name her Princess Warrior Dragon," Annie decided. "Absolutely not,"
Martha laughed. "Nobody is naming anyone horsey or dragon or princess anything."
"But, Mama—"
"We'll discuss names later. Much later." She pulled all three girls into her arms. "Right now, I just want you to know that this doesn't change anything. You're still my daughters. You're still first in my heart. A new baby is just more love, not less." "We know," Eliza said quietly. "We know you have enough love for everyone." The words hit Martha like a physical force. She hugged her daughters tighter and let the tears come. The pregnancy was hard. Martha was older than most first-time mothers, or rather, older than most mothers who'd never carried a child to term. Her body protested the changes in ways that frightened her. There were days when she couldn't keep food down, days when she couldn't get out of bed, days when the fear became so overwhelming she could barely breathe. But she wasn't alone. Josiah was there every moment he could manage, holding her hand through the hard nights, bringing her tea when her stomach rebelled, talking to the growing swell of her belly like the baby could already hear him. The girls were there too. Eliza took over the cooking without being asked. Rosie assigned herself as Martha's official protector, glaring at anyone who looked at her mother wrong. And Annie, sweet, strange Annie, spent hours with her ear pressed to Martha's stomach, reporting back on what the baby was saying. "She says she wants to come out soon," Annie announced one morning. "She's tired of being squished." "She?" Martha smiled. "You think it's a girl?" "I know it's a girl. She told me her name is Gracie." "Did she now?" "Yep. Gracie Catherine Cole. That's what she wants to be called." Martha's breath caught. Catherine, the name of the woman whose death had brought them all together. The woman whose love still echoed through this family, even now. "That's a beautiful name," Martha managed. "I know," Annie said matter-of-factly. "The baby has good taste." The labor came in December, almost exactly a year after Prudence Whitmore had tried to tear them apart. It was hard. Harder than anything Martha had ever experienced. The pain was immense, the fear overwhelming, and more than once she was certain she couldn't do it. But Josiah was there, holding her hand, telling her she was strong. The girls were in the next room, held back by Bessie Turner, but making their presence known through the wall. Rosie's voice. "You can do it, Mama." Eliza's. "We believe in you." Annie's. "Gracie says she's coming now." And then, finally, miraculously, the pain ended and a new sound filled the room. A baby's cry. "It's a girl," Dr. Gray announced, and his voice cracked with emotion. "A perfect, healthy girl." Martha reached for her daughter, her fourth daughter now, though the first she'd carried in her own body. The baby was red-faced and squalling, tiny fists waving in outrage at being expelled from her warm sanctuary. She was the most beautiful thing Martha had ever seen. "Hello, Gracie," Martha whispered. "Hello, my love." The door burst open, and three girls poured in, Bessie Turner's protests completely ignored. "Is that her? Is that the baby? Can I hold her? She's so small." "Careful," Josiah warned, but he was smiling, tears streaming down his face. "She's brand new. Be gentle." Annie peered at the baby with intense scrutiny. "That's Gracie," she confirmed. "I told you her name was Gracie." "You did tell us," Martha agreed. "She has Papa's nose," Eliza observed. "And your chin, Mama," Rosie added. "She's going to be so pretty." Martha looked at her family, her husband with tears in his eyes, her three daughters crowded around the bed, her newborn daughter nestled against her chest, and felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. After all the loss, after all the grief, after years of believing she was meant to be alone, that love always ended in pain, that happiness was something other people got to keep. She was complete. "I love you," she said, not to anyone in particular, to all of them. "I love you so much." "We love you too, Mama," Annie said solemnly. forever and ever and ever. The first year of Gracie's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. Martha had worried, couldn't help worrying, that the older girls might resent the new baby, that they'd feel displaced, forgotten, pushed aside in favor of this tiny, screaming creature who demanded so much attention. She needn't have worried.
Eliza appointed herself Gracie's official guardian, learning to change diapers and mix formula, and soothe crying fits with remarkable skill. Rosie became the baby's protector, standing watch over the cradle with fierce determination. And Annie was Gracie's constant companion, talking to her for hours, convinced that the baby understood every word. "She smiled at me," Annie reported one morning. "A real smile, not a gas smile. She said she loves me best."
"I'm sure she loves all her sisters equally," Martha said diplomatically.
"No, she definitely loves me best. But she loves everyone a lot, so it's okay." Martha couldn't argue with that logic. The town had changed too. With Prudence gone, something had shifted in Silver Creek, a loosening of the rigid judgments that had ruled for so long. People who'd once avoided Martha now stopped to chat. Women who'd whispered about her now asked for her pie recipes. Children who'd been forbidden from playing with the Cole girls now showed up at the ranch every Saturday. Martha would never be entirely accepted. She knew that. There would always be some who looked at her and saw only what she'd been: the fat widow, the woman who'd lost a baby, the cautionary tale. But she'd stopped caring what those people thought. She had a family now, a home, a life so full of love it sometimes overwhelmed her. That was enough. That was more than enough. On the anniversary of their wedding, Josiah found Martha standing at the kitchen window, watching their daughters play in the yard. Eliza was pushing Annie on the rope swing. Rosie was doing cartwheels in the grass. And Gracie, 1 year old now and toddling on unsteady legs, was chasing a butterfly with single-minded determination. "Penny for your thoughts," Josiah said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky? A year ago, I was convinced I'd lost everything." Martha leaned back against him. "I thought leaving was the only way to protect you. I almost walked away from all of this." "But you didn't." "But I didn't." She turned in his arms to face him. "Because you came after me. Because you refused to let me sacrifice myself for some misguided notion of what was best." "I couldn't let you go." His voice was rough. I knew if I let you walk away, I'd never be whole again. None of us would." "And now?" Now, he looked past her, at their daughters playing in the golden afternoon light. "Now I can't imagine this family without you. Can't imagine my life without you. You're the heart of this home, Martha. You always have been. Even when I was just the fat widow who made good biscuits?" "Even then." He kissed her forehead. "Especially then." They stood together, watching their children play, holding each other in the warm kitchen that had become the center of their universe. "I want to tell you something," Martha said finally. "What's that?" "I'm pregnant again." Josiah went absolutely still. Dr. Gray confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have another baby." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then a laugh burst out of him, bright and joyful and utterly free. "Another baby," he said. "Another miracle." "Are you happy?" "Happy?" He lifted her up and spun her around, right there in the kitchen. "Martha, I'm the happiest man alive. How could I be anything else?" She laughed too, wrapping her arms around his neck, letting him spin her until they were both dizzy. This was her life now. This was her family. Not perfect. Nothing was ever perfect. There would be hard days ahead, struggles and setbacks, and moments of doubt. But there would also be this: love that grew bigger instead of smaller. Joy that multiplied instead of divided. A home that always had room for more. Outside, Annie's voice rang out. "Mama! Papa! Gracie caught the butterfly! Come see!" Martha pulled away from Josiah, still laughing, and they went to see. 4 daughters now, soon to be 5, or maybe a son. A husband who loved her exactly as she was. A life she'd never dared to dream of. And it had all started with a cookie. A single star-shaped cookie offered to a silent little girl on a frozen winter day. A small act of kindness that had cracked open a door Martha thought was permanently sealed. She'd learned something important in the years since that moment, something she wished she'd understood earlier, but was grateful to know now. Love wasn't something you earned by being good enough, or pretty enough, or thin enough. It wasn't a reward for following rules, or meeting standards, or being what other people thought you should be. Love was a gift you gave and received freely. A choice you made every single day. A fire you tended with patience and courage, and the willingness to keep showing up, even when it was hard. Martha had spent 3 years believing she wasn't worthy of love. Believing the whispers and the judgments and the cruelty of small-minded people who'd decided her grief made her less than human. She'd been wrong. She was worthy. She'd always been worthy. And now she had a family who reminded her of that truth every single day. "Mama, look!" Annie was holding up a bright blue butterfly, cupped gently in her small hands. "Isn't she beautiful?" "She's beautiful," Martha agreed. "I'm going to let her go now. She has a family to get back to." Annie opened her hands, and the butterfly lifted off, wings catching the light as it rose into the summer sky. Martha watched it go, feeling Josiah's hand in hers, hearing her daughter's laughter, knowing that this moment, this family, this love, was everything she'd ever wanted, everything she'd ever needed, everything she'd finally allowed herself to have. The fat widow everyone had mocked had become the mother everyone admired. The woman who'd lost everything had found more than she'd ever dared to hope for. The cautionary tale had become a love story, and it wasn't over. It would never be over, because this family, her family, was built on a foundation that couldn't be shaken, not by gossip, not by judgment, not by anything the world could throw at them. They had each other. They had love. They had the courage to keep choosing each other, day after day, through whatever came. That was enough. That was everything. That was forever.